Hello everyone, welcome back to the Prepared Mind channel. This video is going to be about non-preppers, but we as preppers need to be very interested in this topic. We have seen trouble in Turkey. Turkey, in just a matter of a couple days, has seen the value of their currency absolutely drop, tank, and it's upset the rest of the planet, right? So as preppers, we're supposed to be, let's just go with 5% of the population. That means 1 in 20. Why does this news matter? You know, everyone else seems to be asleep at the wheel. Everybody except those who are paying attention. Well, I think there's some lessons to be learned here. All right. So in the last few years, there's been discussion about hyperinflation and what happens and how it happens and what are the results. And our example has been Venezuela. That's right, the South American nation of Venezuela is now dealing with hyperinflation. And it's being compared to other great hyperinflationary examples like Zimbabwe, where it took trillions of Zimbabwe dollars to buy a donut. Also, the Weimar Republic in Germany after World War I, they had to pay millions of Deutschmarks to buy a loaf of bread. It was ridiculous. Wheelbarrows full of money, in other words. The currency was so worthless that it wasn't worth using as toilet paper. Anyways, let's take a look at what's going on in Turkey. Their currency is taking a dive. No one on the street really seems to notice or care. People in investing in the investment world, yeah, they're taking big notice, big notice. Right? Venezuela took years to come down and down and down. And it seems like overnight, actually it really was overnight, Turkey's lira has dropped substantially in value. First Friday, then over the weekend, then today, Monday, and then tomorrow, which will be Tuesday, which is when you're watching this. It is interesting to watch. And again, I'm not the news man. I'm not bringing you breaking news. What I want to do is talk about what is happening so we can start thinking about it from different perspectives. So why is it that Venezuela took 3 years to get to where they're at? Yet, if the rest of this week continues, Turkey will be there, in a matter of 1-2 weeks. But the difference is Venezuela, people were used to it because it took so long, right? They were the frog in the pot with the heat being turned up, slowly being brought up to boil. Whereas the Turks, they're going to feel it right away because they remember just yesterday my lira bought me a coffee or a cappuccino, and today it only bought half a cappuccino. So they're feeling it, and they're feeling the sting really fast. So why the difference? Why did Venezuela go so slow? Why is Turkey going so fast? Why is it that several years ago Cyprus, overnight, had to shut their banks down? What's the difference? What's the difference? Let's leave Cyprus out of the equation. We can get back to that later if we want. This is a thought I really had to ponder, so I wanted to throw it by you guys, let you think about it. If you think about Venezuela, it's in South America. It's had socialist regimes. Communists are basically all over the place in South America. Communism, we normally think of as the Eastern Bloc, Soviet Union, China. Ooh, wow. But down in South America, they've had a communist problem for decades. So the people there are used to instability. They're used to currency issues. So how have they adapted? How have they dealt with it? Well, this is how I think they've dealt with it. They have a black market economy. That is to say, people are willing to trade what they know, their skill, for another object. Why would they do that? Well, they wouldn't have to report income. They wouldn't have to handle money. What does that do for them? It keeps them out of the sights of the government. The government wants to overtax them, regulate them, control them, punish them, right? They're socialists. So Venezuela has a black market services and a black market goods program. That is to say, if you have a loaf of bread and you want to trade it for a fish, you trade it that way. They're used to wheeling and dealing and bartering. In other words, their need for cash is significantly lower than everyone else. Well, relatively speaking. Second world nations, maybe like Turkey, and first world nations like the United States, we don't really have a black market that is as close to the surface as Venezuela. And I don't want to say there isn't a black market, even here in the U.S., because there is. Black market for many, many things. But it's not out on the surface. You can't really find it on the street corner. Maybe in some cities, yes, but not everywhere. For the most part, Americans are honest. The people deal straightforward. They buy their goods and services, and they pay their taxes. Right? We seem to do that. In other countries, they do absolutely everything they can to avoid government, to avoid banks, and so they had an underground economy. Now, all underground economies rely on legitimate economies to support them and provide the foundation or the basis on which they do their black market goodies. So in Venezuela, as the bolivar weakened and weakened and weakened, or rather you could say inflated and inflated and hyperinflated, as it hyperinflated, it made the black market, which is a significantly smaller and shorter piece, as hyperinflation happened there, right, the black market, it became less efficient because the legitimate market, the legitimate government, was becoming unstable. So I'm thinking about how this works. These people, right, at some point legitimate money comes into the black market and feeds it and controls it and regulates it that way. Kind of a secondary setup. Once Venezuela started suffering, the black market suffered with it. So if you were doing, say, 20% of your business or 30% of your business in the black market or off-grid, it didn't affect you as much as people who were 100%, tied to cash. In any event, the black market is probably, in my estimation, from my chair, it looks like that is what helped Venezuela tough out all these problems, because everyone's used to dealing, right, back behind the store, in the alley, doing bartering, trading, horse trading, services for goods, goods for other goods. But no economy can survive if the government has completely robbed the people, if the banks have robbed the people of their wealth. So now we look at Turkey. How is it that Turkey has suffered so quickly? Well, Turkey, I'm going to say, is not third world. It is not Venezuela. Yeah, it's an ancient culture. It's an ancient country. But it's not the same thing as Venezuela. While Turkey is a country rich in tradition, and they're also rich in gold. That's right. Turkey, for the size, and most people don't think of it as a big deal. We think of the U.S. and Japan and China and Russia, Germany and England, France and Italy as being very large economies with lots of real wealth. While Turkey is way up there. They have an awful lot of gold and an awful lot of wealth. They are tied in. I believe they're a NATO participant, right? They're a participating NATO state. And they've also done what? They've allied themselves with Russia. Right? Turkey's playing both sides. But they have a very legitimate government and system of doing business. They are tied to the first world banking system, an investment system. They're an emerging market right now. So they are heavily dependent on what other people think of them and how they've been funded. And their currency, right, it's taken a dive really fast. Really fast. The people, you would think they have more black market, let's just put it this way. savvy. But they don't. I think they really do rely on their currency, and maybe even more than their own internal black market. But their currency relies on what everyone else thinks of their nation. No one really gave a shit about Venezuela. People really do give a shit about Turkey. A lot of money's been invested there. Right? It hasn't been run by communists and socialists, but it is being run by Erdogan and others. And this idea of currency and black markets and gold and corruption, they're all, the entire system's tuned into itself. So it's my opinion that a country, the more advanced they are, let's just say the more reliant they are on other countries to fund them, the greater the risk of a currency devaluation, a currency crash, right, and shit hitting the fan. So because Venezuela was out of the way, because they have a black market that people can exist and do well and subsist, and because no one really invested in Venezuela because of their government, right, their currency slowly went to shit. Turkey, on the other hand, going much faster. What I want to do for us is say, well, what about the United States of America? Or what about Great Britain? Or what about Australia? Or what about Canada? We are incredibly tied to the system. Right? If the Federal Reserve burps funny after a meeting, people read that into the tea leaves and either buy or sell or make moves. In other words, we are not independent of everybody because of our wealth. We are, because of our wealth and our first world status and the fact that there's so much above board, that we are completely and utterly reliant on the world. Turkey, supposedly a no-name country, right, takes a crap, and now the rest of the world is shaking in its boots. The investment world, that is, the percentage that pays attention. Preppers definitely paying attention. Right? How can Turkey, some seemingly Middle East little insignificant country, how can it affect markets over here? Well, it's because everyone's invested in Turkey. Not everyone, but many, many, many have invested in Turkey. Billions and billions of dollars. It's an emerging economy. It's significant strategically. It's significant militarily in a lot of ways. The U.S. is even more so significant military, tied into all banking systems, international trade. We aren't an emerging market. We are the market. The big one. The big boy on the block. So if we have a shake-up or a shakedown, the rest of the world is going to tremble and follow, and then we will follow them. So I'm saying, well, if Venezuela took 3 years to crash, and it takes Turkey, let's say 3 weeks, to come down, 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 down to where their money becomes worthless on the street, how fast will the U.S. go? How fast? If I remember back in '08, one day everything was fine, the next day it wasn't, and the day after that, Hank Paulson was on the floor of the House of Representatives saying, if you don't give us a shit pile of money called TARP money, we're going to have martial law and blood in the streets. That's how fast we will go. Everyone likes to go, well, people I talk to, they like to make the discussion, the argument, the debate with me. Well, look how far and how long Venezuela has taken to go to hyperinflation. We don't have anything to worry about. It would take years to get there. And I go, time out. We have other examples where it was much, much faster. And Turkey is a supreme example, just in the last few days, of how quick things can change. Now, here in the U.S., we don't have the black market systems set up. People pay their taxes. They're afraid of the IRS. They're afraid of the state taxation boards. Here in California, they call it the Franchise Tax Board. Sounds pretty innocuous, doesn't it? But every business in California pays their sales tax to the Franchise Tax Board, which is this little silly building in Sacramento. but they sure collect a lot of taxes. Anyways, side note, we don't have the black market system. Store owners are honest. They've got a store. They're being audited. They're being looked at. So they won't have a barter system set up. I can't go to the hardware store and say, look, I need 3 shovels, 2 pickaxes, and a case of wasp spray. And say, what I would like to do is trade you a handful of 22 ammunition and some tomatoes out of my garden and name a couple other items, you know, and come to some kind of bartering system. You know, well, he might say, John, that was great, but I've already got a handful of this and a handful of that and some other stuff. I don't need any of your guys' shit. I need cash. I need liquidity. I need money. Moolah. Right? Plus, I'm not allowed, right? How am I going to account for the change of inventory, right, when I get audited? We can't have that sort of thing happen. It's going to have to develop quickly, and it will, but it just gives you a taste. It gives you a flavor, or it gives me a flavor and a taste of the type of shit we're going to have to deal with and how quick it could fall upon us. Shit hitting the fan is not about a Venezuelan-style slow slide. And, well, I mean, it could be. At the same time, we have a great example, great historic examples of how we can get there very, very, very quickly. Right? We have some bullshit with Iran. In fact, we had what? A missile today? Was it a Spanish missile or some NATO missile? It was NATO, but I think it was Spain. Kind of launched a little bit of ordnance. I think it landed in Russia. Whoops! Right? We could have retaliation. We could have one country saying, how dare you fucking accidentally drop ordnance into my nation. Right? We're going to embargo your country. Fuck you. So Russia embargoes Spain. Spain gives them the bird. The rest of NATO says, hey, fuck you, Russia. Pretty soon we're on the brink of war. Iran says, well, that's fine. Then fuck it. We're not sending oil to anyone. All of a sudden there's an oil crisis, an energy crisis in Europe. I mean, we don't know how this can play. If last week, go back to last Wednesday, someone said, hey, what do you think would happen if the Turkish currency lost 50% of its value? I can guarantee that anyone you talk to would say, well, you know, it's not a good thing, but it wouldn't bother me, wouldn't bother the system, but it has. That's just one tiny little developing nation, second world. Important, but tiny. And look at the ripples it's caused, and look what it's shown us. I mean, the tragedy that's occurring in Turkey, right? I had my dinner. I had a delicious dinner. Nothing to worry about for me. Didn't change my bank account a bit. Didn't change my buying power a bit. But the people in Turkey, right? Instead of a turkey on their table, they got a chicken, right? It's smaller. They have a lot to worry about. Now, instead of going about their daily business, they have a great deal of uncertainty. The faith in their currency is shaken. Right? Their belief system is now under attack. They are now scared. Imagine what's going to happen in this country when we get just a flavor of that. The panic that will ensue. The stupidity that will follow. That's what the essence of being a prepper is understanding that, yeah, things are getting steadily screwy. You're getting goofy by the week, as I've taken the time to line out every week. You know, it's getting there screwily. The economy of the train is slowing down. Right? Everything is getting worse. But we could have an episode of bam, and it just collapses. It crushes. Faster than Turkey. And when these things happen, what happens? Well, and was it 1933? Every bank in the country just didn't bother to open their doors. They called it a bank holiday. And when people came back, when they opened the banks, the value of their money was decreased significantly. Significantly. The gold standard was tinkered with. Their value was tinkered with. Essentially, it was a reissuance of the currency, a revaluation. They could get to go and get the same dollars, but all of a sudden they had less value. There's a great deal of discussion right now about what the United States is going to do. We've got approximately $20 trillion in debt. The annual payment, right, the debt service on that debt alone, that is not the principal, not paying down the debt, but just to pay the interest to the banks that have loaned the government that money, which is just a bunch of zeros and ones digitally. They didn't create anything or loan them anything. But the debt service, what we, the people, have to pay back with our hard labor and taxes, is about $500 billion. $500 billion a year, right now, just to service the debt. That's incredible. It's incredibly painful to think that banks are making that for doing what? For typing in some ones and zeros on a computer screen. Right? They're going to need to do something before we have a Venezuela times Turkey times Weimar Republic in Zimbabwe, where all of a sudden our country's insolvent. It won't have the cash or the ability to even pay the interest. We're going to have some sort of currency revaluation, or maybe the new SHTF, right? A new dollar that's issued. You have to turn in all your old dollars, Federal Reserve notes, and even if they reissue United States notes from the United States Treasury, and we just step out from under all of that debt, all of a sudden you go, well, wait a minute, I had the equivalent of $100,000, and now under the new dollar system I only have 20, right? I've lost 80% of my wealth. If you don't think that alone isn't going to have an impact, a massive impact on people's decisions and people's behavior, right? Rich people are going to be highly pissed off and incensed. Poor people are going to be highly incensed and pissed off, right? Everyone's going to feel it. You know, rich people go, why did I work hard all those years? And the poor people will say, I'm going to have an even harder time paying my bills now. You know, and there's going to be an adjustment period in all of this. It is a very feasible shit hits the fan scenario. And we can have shit hitting the fan, literally, just like Turkey. Bam, all of a sudden we have a problem. And it becomes chronic. It becomes acute. And we have shit hits the fan. We have cities on fire. We have people marauding each other. We have other people doing their version of the purge all over the country. Little hot spots of stupid bullshit everywhere. People dying, mass hysteria. Crap. And 3 or 4 weeks later, the government says, hey! And they sound like your dad. Stop it! We're going to issue a new currency. Everyone will be fine. Everyone behave. And so everyone sits back and calms down. And the government says, here's some new money. We're going to start this over again. Let's try and figure this out. Knock this shit off. Here's some money. And everyone calms down for a day. And then they start trying to figure out, what's this money worth? Well, last week a loaf of bread was $3, and this week it's $1.50. Except the dollar that I have now is worth 1/10, and so I'm fucked. Right? They can't meet their obligations. Rent, which is in the old dollars and the new dollar, it's, in other words, it's a very confusing time. Once again, the clowns in the circus start acting up and fighting with each other. Hot spots of shit as the fan cropping up, right? Deliveries of fuel, deliveries of food. Confused. What's our money worth? What did this cost? How do we pay back our debtors? It's not just the banks and the government. It's you and me and everyone in between. How do we pay for shit? How do we value it? That's why, what? Oh, whoops, gold and silver. Yeah, that used to be the way to value things. From 1778, 1789. There we go, thank you. 1789, U.S. Constitution. From that point all the way to the point where they came off the gold standard, which was in the early 1900s, when they started revaluing shit. Even though we were still on the gold standard, they revalued gold. Gold stayed consistently worth, what is it, 20 bucks an ounce? And silver was $1 an ounce. It was a silver dollar. And it was always a silver dollar. And that silver dollar essentially was what someone made in a day. It was a day's wages. And so you could count on that dollar to purchase the same thing forever. Because that day's wage that I created 10 years ago, if I save that dollar, it's still valuable today. Now today, let's just say I work and I make 50 bucks an hour. In 10 more years, that could be $100 an hour, the wage. And so it's like telling me the work I did 10 years ago is only worth half, 50%. So by having money based on gold and silver, something real that's consistent, no inflation, right? Your work, your effort continues to carry value through life. Anyways, we're seeing these problems because they've gone far, far away from sound money. We've gone to this system that's corrupt, and the chickens are coming home to roost. Interestingly, today was the first time I've heard in the discussion a talk about confiscating wealth from people. If the government is absolutely broke, that they would confiscate people's wealth. That they would go to people and say, well, you've got 2 houses. You don't get to have 2 houses when some people have none. And they take houses, or they take cars, or whatever cash is available, they take from people and say, we're sorry, the government needs it, the country's in dire straits, and it's life or death. And so you give us your money or it's going to be your death. And they can do that. People that make big amounts of money, people who are profiteering off of the crisis, the government can go to them and say, hey, you're making windfall profits throughout all this chaos, and so you're going to have to pay 90% taxes. And there is historical precedence for it. Anyways, this is the first time this discussion has come up. What that tells me is they've gone from talking about the need for gold and silver. They're people, economists, smart guys who are looking into the future, trying to predict what's going on. They're not just talking about an economic reset or a reissuance of currency. Now they're talking about, well, all of that has happened in their minds. What is the next thing that happens? What is the next thing that government does? Because the government only cares about itself. Continuity of government. Perpetuity of authority. That's what they're concerned about. So these smart guys are going, well, what's the next step? We're well on our way down this road to an economic collapse, shit it's the fan scenario. What else comes? What else is part of it? How can you protect yourself? Will you need to literally protect yourself? The answer is yes. So, once again, food, water, shelter, clothing, medicine, means of self-defense. That is how you're going to protect yourself. Right? Because if this just bam, 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 little problems, left, right. Good scotch. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Problems here, problems there. If there's no food at the store, you can't even go to the store and stand in line for any purpose. But if you're a prepper, you don't have to. You know, it's that sort of thinking that keeps you out of the limelight, keeps you out of trouble. And it puts you in a position to benefit in a healthy way physically and mentally, because you only have to worry about what's going on. You don't have to worry about what's going on and your next meal and protection and, right, if, ands, and buts. You don't have to worry about those. You're a prepper. So welcome to the party. Buckle up, sit down, and it's just going to get crazy. And they could calm it down too. We could get a break between rounds, but it's going to start right back up. And we're getting closer to these midterm elections. The heat is being turned up. You guys be cool. Chance favors. The prepared mind is yours. Thank you again for supporting us through Patreon. You guys rock. And holy shit, think about it. It's coming. Bye-bye.